Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you're all keeping well and safe wherever you are in the world right now. I'm Lauren, and in this video I want to chat to you about lots of different types of simple top patterns that there are. And when I first started getting back into dressmaking again, like in a big way, about 10 years ago or so, and like really started building up my handmade wardrobe, tops were my total go-to as a make because they didn't really take that long, they didn't really use that much fabric, and it was really easy to pair it with other stuff that I had in my wardrobe already anyway. So if you're looking to do a little bit of dressmaking, then making a nice simple top is a great way to get a good sewing fix. So I'm going to chat you through some of the simple top sewing patterns that we have in the shop, and I'm sitting in the shop just now and you can see there's lots of patterns behind me here. This is the pattern wall in the shop, and I have sort of split them into 3 different categories. We do just stock independent sewing patterns in the shop here, so they're all sort of smaller companies, but hopefully the sort of styles that I'm going to show you and talk you through will just give you a general idea about things to consider when you're going to make a simple top. So if you end up with a pattern that's, you know, from maybe one of the big 4 companies, I'm sure you'll sort of see some similarities in some of the styles I'm going to chat to you about today. So I've split them up into 3 different categories. I've got really simple ones that either have raglan sleeves or grown-on sleeves. So a raglan sleeve is actually the top that I'm wearing just now. This is the Friday pattern company Raglan Blouse, and it's when there's a seam going from underneath the arm up to the neck, and that is what creates the sleeve. And it's a much easier way to put a sleeve into a garment because this seam here is just like kind of sewing a straight-ish seam. It's not as sort of fiddly or kind of as long a process as actually setting in a sleeve. So we've got raglan sleeves or grown-on sleeves first, and then I've got some sleeveless top patterns for you, and then I've also got some set-in sleeve patterns as well. So I tried to sort of separate them out into that sort of style kind of segmentation. Hopefully you find that useful. Now, a lot of the patterns that I'm going to mention to you, probably all of them in fact, are actually suitable for a range of lots of different fabric. They are all for woven fabric, so not for anything that's like stretchy or jersey fabric. That's kind of a sort of whole other topic that I thought I'd leave to the side. This is just for woven fabrics, but depending on what you want the overall sort of finished look and style of the top to be like, it can really be impacted by the type of fabric. And I was finding that when I was sort of looking at all of the different patterns and what you can make with them, I started to kind of notice a similar sort of pattern, and that with a simple top, really you can go from like a very sort of lightweight, floaty, drapey fabric through to something that is more structured, and depending on what you choose will just give the look of the garment overall, you know, overall a different look. So what I also want to direct you to at the start is that last year, I'm pretty sure it was last year, I did some videos that were like a fabric focus series. So I did one that was on more sort of like slippery, floaty fabrics, and that includes things like viscose, rayon, modal, tencel, anything that's sort of silk, you know, anything that's sort of like floaty, moving around all over the place. This is a viscose, and you can see, you know, it's quite floaty and drapey. And then I have got other cotton fabric videos too, so I'm going to link them in the description of this video because you might find that quite useful in terms of just understanding fabrics a bit better. But essentially you can either go for, with a simple top, you can either go for something that is more floaty and drapey and lightweight, so your rayon, your viscose, your tencel, that kind of, your crepe de chine, that kind of area, or you can go for something like a linen or a cotton shirting or a poplin, something like that that's got a bit more structure to it, or you can kind of go for something that's a bit more in the middle, like a cotton lawn or a cotton voile. So really I think you need to think about what you want the finished garment to actually look like, and then also what your level of experience is as well. Those slippery, more floaty fabrics are harder to work with than the more structured ones. But if you're making a simple style and you have made garments before, then don't be put off by something that's slippery. It does make a beautiful garment, and if the construction's simple, then it might just be a nice sort of way to introduce you to working with those more tricky, slippery fabrics. So you can see here in these close-ups of the fabrics, these are a mixture of viscose. I've got some viscose fabrics and I've got some tencel fabrics as well, and you can see when I'm moving them around how much movement and drape they do have. They're nice and sort of floaty, they're kind of slippery a little bit, and when you sort of hold them up, they do drape really, really nicely. Whereas these fabrics here, so these are some linen fabrics. You can see their structure is held much, much more. Linen and cottons together, and you can just see that the fabric doesn't sort of float or kind of drape as much. These ones here are a cotton lawn, so although they're very, very lightweight and they do have some drape and movement, they are just holding their shape that little bit more than, say, the viscoses, which just move around a lot. So the first pattern that I want to talk to you about is the one that I'm wearing. It's the Friday Pattern Company Raglan Blouse. So it's a lovely loose fitting blouse. It's got elastic in the cuff and the hem, and this creates a sort of gathered effect and allows the fabric to kind of blouse over the top of the hems. And then it's got raglan sleeves, as I mentioned before, so these are nice and easy to construct. The casing for the elastic itself is created just by simply turning and pressing back the fabric. And then the neckline is finished with some bias binding, and we stock a whole range of ready-made viscose binding from Atelier Brunette, which is much easier to sort of work with, because when you make your own viscose or like bias binding out of a slippery fabric, can be quite fiddly. So when it comes ready-made, it makes it much, much easier. So really, for this style of blouse, I would say it is better to go more towards the floaty, drapey end of the spectrum, the viscose, the rayon, the tencel. I'm going to keep saying the same things over again, because it has got that blousing effect. If you do use something that's got more structure, it's probably just going to feel like quite full and quite tenty. So I mean, I'm not saying you can't use it, it's just having a think about how is the structure of this fabric and what's it going to look like once it's actually made up. The next pattern is the Megan Nielsen River, and this is also a raglan sleeve, so it's nice and easy to set in, and this pattern is super, super versatile. You can actually use stretch fabrics to make this garment too, but because I'm just focusing on woven fabrics in this video, I'm just going to chat to you about them. So there's a top or a dress length, and then there's also a V-neck or a round neck. The top is actually reversible, so you could choose whether you wanted a V-neck at the front and a round neck at the back, or switch it round and have the round neck at the front and the V-neck at the back. So really, really a versatile pattern. And then again, depending on what you want that finished look of the garment to be like, choose your fabric accordingly. The options of what you can make with this pattern are pretty much endless, because you can use it with stretch fabric too. But in terms of woven fabric, if you're wanting it to be sort of more blousey and move around, because it is quite loose fitted, you just pull it on and off over your head, then go for those viscose rayon tencel category. If you want it to sort of be a bit more structured and hold its shape a bit more, then you're looking at like the cottons and the linens and that kind of thing. So the next pattern is the Tilly and the Buttons Stevie top. Now this top, which also has a dress length option too, has quite a modern boxy fit, and it's got a round neckline with those grown on sleeves. So the sleeves are basically just an extension of the bodice piece. There's not actually like a separate bit of fabric that you're putting on to create the sleeve here. So it's a really nice, easy way to have a garment that's got sleeves on it. It does have some cuffs to sew on, but they're much easier to put on than actually setting in a sleeve that would have a seam over the head of the shoulder. Now, in terms of fabric for this pattern, the options are pretty varied depending on your skill level and what style you want. It is quite loose fitted, this top as well. It doesn't have any darts or anything. You're just pulling it on and off over your head. So again, if you're wanting something that's going to float and drape more, opt for that kind of style. Or if you want something that's easier to work with and going to hold its shape a lot more, then like cotton lawn, cotton gauze, linen mixes, that kind of thing are going to be easier to work with, but they will sort of hold that boxy shape of the top a little bit more. Then the next group of patterns that I've got to talk to you about are the sleeveless ones. So the first one is the Grainline willow top, and it does also come with a dress length as well. So it's just quite a classic sleeveless top. It's more fitted at the shoulders, falls into quite a relaxed A-line shape. It does have bust darts as well, and then it's got a nice deep hem, which I quite like too. The neckline and the armholes are finished with bias binding, which is a nice skill to master, and I do actually have 2 other videos that are on bias binding. One's on how to make your own and one's on how to actually sew onto your garments, so I can link to that as well in the description to this video. But it's just quite a nice simple shape. I've actually made a few versions of this top before and used different fabrics. So I have used a viscose fabric to make it too, so then that A-line shape just sort of like flows and floats a little bit more, and I have also used a cotton linen to make it as well, and in that case the A-line shape is just held sort of a little bit straighter. So again, it depends what sort of look you want to go for. The next one is another Grainline pattern, that is the uniform tunic. This one does actually have a sleeve option as well, but it can be made sleeveless. The version that I've made before was a sleeveless version, and it's got a facing at the neckline too. It does have bust stars, but you're just pulling it on and off over your head, so it is still loose enough that you can do that. And then it's got a seam where it's got some nice pockets that you can put into, and there's lots of versatility in this pattern because the little sort of skirt shape at the bottom can be either sort of straight or kind of split slightly. You can have the pockets, or you can leave the pockets out. You can have sleeves or not, and it's got a couple of neckline options as well. In terms of fabrics for this one, I actually think that fabrics that do hold their shape work a bit better for this pattern. I think if you were doing the pockets in it and it was a fabric that was more sort of swishy and moved, the pockets might just kind of sag a little bit more. So I think something that does have a bit more structure. The one I used was a pinstriped cotton that was more of a kind of medium weight, and it did hold its shape pretty well. But yeah, cotton lawns, lightweight denims, chambres, linen mixes, that kind of thing, they are all going to work really, really well for this pattern. Then the next one is the Cashmere Springfield top, and at first glance this top looks really similar to the Grainline willow top, but there are a few crucial differences. So if you've not come across Cashmere before, their size range actually starts at a US size 12 and goes up to a US 28, and it also offers 3 cup sizes as well. So it's basically like the pattern has built-in full bust adjustments. So if you find that you usually have to do full bust adjustments, these patterns sort of take that element out of that because they offer the different cup size options. It does have a few other differences from the willow. So one of the versions is more loose and swingy, and it has an optional hemband, whereas the other one has back princess seams, which just make it a little bit more fitted. Both of those versions have scoop necklines and back yokes, and the side seams split as well at the bottom. So the overall look is quite similar to the willow in terms of it's just like a sleeveless, quite plain top, but in terms of fitting, it's just a bit different, so something to bear in mind. In terms of fabric suggestions, again, really versatile, depends on how much structure you want the top to have. So you could go for a cotton lawn or a linen or a chambray for something that's got more structure, or then you're looking at, again, your viscose, rayon, tencel, that kind of group if you're wanting something that's got a little bit more swish to it. The last one in the sleeveless department is the True Bias Ogden Mikami. So it's another wardrobe staple. It's a really simple cami, and it's got a soft V-neck at the front and back, and then these really lovely delicate spaghetti straps. It's finished with a partial lining around the neckline and armholes, so that makes for construction much more straightforward. You're not having to sort of fiddle with bias binding or anything. And then it doesn't have darts, so it is sort of more fitted like over the top of the bust, and then it just falls into a sort of A-line shape at the bottom. I've made a lot of versions of this in the summertime. It's one of like my go-to patterns. It's also really good if you've got some leftovers from another project, so it doesn't really use that much fabric, and you can use the partial lining on the inside, like you could use a different contrasting fabric for that too. So again, depending on what you want that finished look to be, then pick your fabric accordingly. I have used viscose to make it, which makes it really swishy. I've used a double gauze, a cotton double gauze, which has a bit more structure to it. You can use a cotton lawn as well. You could use a chambray. Basically anything goes, and again, like I've said so many times before, you just got to think about, what do you want that finished garment to be like? Do you want it to have more structure and hold its shape, or do you want it to be nice and swishy and floaty? Then the last group of patterns that I've got are all ones that have set-in sleeves. So that is when you see the seam round over the shoulder, like the head of your shoulder here. So it's like a separate bit of fabric that you're sewing on to create the sleeve. So the first pattern in that category is another Grainline one, and it is the Scout tee. So this is like a really classic woven tee shape. You pull it on and off over your head. It's more fitted over the shoulders, and then it falls into a sort of looser shape below, but it doesn't have any bust darts or shaping through the waist. And then the neckline is finished off with bias binding. So I've also made this top quite a few times before. I personally think it looks best in a more floaty type kind of fabric, so the rayon viscose Tencel category, just because of the weight, just the cut of it. Really, it looks quite full and quite kind of tenty a bit if you use a more structured fabric with it. You know, I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm just saying it's a thing to consider. Again, you just got to always think about, what do you want that finished garment to be like. My preference would be the more floaty, lighter weight ones, but you could use it with a bit more of a structured fabric as well, like a lawn or a chambray. The next pattern in the sleeves category is the Closet Case Patterns Sealeo top, and this does also come with a dress option as well, and I just really love the details. It's a more boxy shaped tee, and there is an angled shoulder yoke as well. It's got bust darts, but overall it does have a roomy fit, and you can choose between 2 sleeve options and then either have a facing or bias binding to finish off the neckline. So I have made a version of this in a viscose. It was an Atelier Brunette one, and I really like it. It's quite cropped, the cropped version, so I did lengthen it a little bit. I have also made it in a cotton linen mix as well, and it just had a bit more structure to it, and it is quite boxy, so I didn't really prefer that option as much. But the pattern is really versatile, and again, it just depends what sort of style you like at the end. The next one is the Merchant & Mills Camber top. And this one is also quite a simple tee shape, but has a few more interesting details. So it's got a back yoke, and it's got an exposed bias finish, but just at the front neckline, and then it's got bust darts as well, but you do just pull that one on and off over your head too, so it is loose enough that you can do that. Just like basically all of the other options that I've shown you. Again, depending on what sort of finish look you want to go for, then you can choose your fabric accordingly. I would say, having made this top before, and I did use more of a medium weight cotton to make it, I would say if you were using something that was like more slippery kind of fabric, it would be quite fiddly, just the way that you put the binding in at the neckline. I think it might be quite hard to get that sort of quite neat, depending on your skill level, of course. So probably going to be generally easier if you have something that's got a bit more structure to it, so like a cotton lawn or like a cotton linen mix, or even like a linen viscose, so it's got a bit more structure to it. I think that would make it a little bit easier just to handle the way it's constructed. And then finally, the last top in the sleeve category is the Grainline Hadley top. So the overall shape of the Hadley, I would say, is quite full. It does also have a sleeveless version as well. I've made the version with sleeves myself, and they are more of a bracelet length. They're not totally long, so they sort of stop just short of the wrist. So depending on whether you like that, you might want to maybe think about lengthening it a bit. It's got a couple of neckline options, so a nice V-neck or a higher round neck, and then you can see it's got that dipped hem with a hem facing too, so it is quite heavy at the bottom, and it is sort of quite full. So I would say generally fabrics that are lighter weight or a bit more sort of fluid and drapey are going to work best for this, just because of the fullness in the body. My version that I've made is out of a double gauze. A couple of years ago, the G&G team all made different versions of the Hadley, and I did a blog post on that, so I'll put a link to that as well, so you can see what different versions look like in different kinds of fabric. But yeah, again, depending on whether you want it to have more sort of structure or shape, or you want it to be kind of flowy and swishy, then you can choose your fabric accordingly to that. So I hope you found that useful, and just highlighting some of the different styles and the options that are out there for simple tops. I feel like I've probably been quite repetitive in saying, you know, depending on what the style you want, you can choose your fabric accordingly, but it is true. You can customize whatever pattern that you make by picking a different type of fabric for it. And it's also a really good way to get use out of the same pattern and make several different versions from different types of fabric, because it really does change the kind of look and feel of the garment that you end up with. So all of these patterns are available to buy in our online shop. We ship worldwide, and we do also have a huge selection of fabrics as well that would go with these patterns. And the blog post that goes with this video, which I shall put a link to in the description, I'll put some specific fabric suggestions that we have at the moment there. But if you've got a fabric stash at home already and you're looking for something to use with it, tops are a great option, because some of the simpler ones really don't use that much fabric. So it is just a nice way to sort of make use of stuff that you might already have at home. If you've got any questions at all, then you can leave a comment below and I shall try and get back to you as quickly as I can. If you've got any sort of specific questions about stock availability of anything more related to like purchasing the patterns or fabrics, if you direct that to our shop email address, which is info@guthrie-ganny.co.uk, will also be in the description of the video, then the staff in the shop can help you on there, and of course the link to my online shop will be in the description too. So yeah, thanks for watching guys. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, just remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks guys, bye!